Resourceful Designer, episode 73, Pricing Design Jobs with Undefined Timelines.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing.
And now, your host. He's never solved a Rubik's Cube, Mark Dickhout.
Welcome to another episode. I'm so glad that you've plugged me in your ears, pressed play on your device, and you're joining me today as we discuss our graphic design businesses. Now, I have an interesting episode to share with you today, and it has to do with pricing. And actually, something that I've seen come up quite a bit over the years is a question on how do you price a job when you have no idea how long it's going to take you to do the job? And that's what I want to talk about today. But before I get to today's topic, I just want to share a little bit about what's been happening in my life lately. First of all, as I'm recording this right now, it is a scorcher here. We're in the middle of May, and the temperature with the Humidex is 35 degrees Celsius, which is 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm sitting in my room here, and in order to get the best sound for the podcast, I got the windows closed, the air conditioner, we haven't turned it on yet this season, I've got my door closed, and I'm just sweating here. But I'm doing it for the podcast because I want to get the best sound quality possible. Now, I want to share a little conversation I had with a client earlier today. And this is a client I'm doing, it's for a youth football league. And every year I do these little player cards. They're like trading cards. And every player in the youth football leagues gets their own little trading cards that they can hand out to their friends and everything. And they hold a combine at the beginning of the year. And if you don't want to know what a combine is, it's kind of a little skills assessment where the players they try out different things and to see how good they are. And then from there, they will divide the players up into individual teams so that the teams will be evenly matched. So the card has their photo on the front and their name, and on the back, it has the results of their skills competition. Well, this is the third year that I'm doing this project for this club. And this year, for some reason, they sent me the photo, and I think there's like 180 photos of the kids. And for one thing, the woman in charge sent me every single photo in a separate email. So I got 180 emails, or I forget, 182, 183, whatever. Over 180 emails, each one with a photo and the child's name as the subject line. Now, I looked at the photos, and unfortunately, the photos that she provided were generic file names, the ones that come directly from the camera, which are just gibberish. They don't mean anything. And the thing is I have to copy all of these to a folder. So once they're copied to a folder, I have no idea which kid is who anymore. So I told them, I said, listen, I don't mind going through and copying an image or a photo from an email and then copying the subject line from the email and pasting it into onto the file itself so that I know now that this file name is named with the child's name. I says, I don't mind doing that with 180 some odd photos, but you're paying me my hourly rate to do this. And I gave them the option. I said, listen, you can pay me my hourly rate and I will gladly do this for you. Or you can resend me the photos with the child name amended as the file name. And they chose to do the latter. They're going to send me new photos. But it's just one of those things I want to say. Sometimes you have to have communication with your client and you don't just take things at face value. No, it's a big job. And I gave them the option. I said, listen, I don't mind doing it, but it's going to cost you if you want me to do this. It wasn't part of the original deal we had. So I says, it's going to be on top of whatever price I had quoted them. And they came back and they said, no, we'll take care of it. We'll rename all the photos and send them back to you. So great. But I just wanted to share that with you to show you that it's okay to talk to your clients, have interactions with them, and say, listen, the way you gave it to me is going to either cause me problems or it's going to cost you money. Do you want to do it a different way that will save you money? And the client will actually appreciate that. She came back and she says, well, I have time to do it. So thank you so much, Mark. I'll take care of it. We'd prefer not spend the money. We have a very limited budget. We've already budgeted the amount when we can't spend any more on this project. So I'll gladly do it. So there you go. Just talk to your clients. And that's when you have the great relationship with them. That's what happens. So anyways, now I'd like to share a tip of the week with you. And this week's tip is to get your clients to pay for things that you need to run your business. What I mean by this is every once in a while, you'll come across something that a client will need for their project. This works especially well if you do web design. Maybe the client will need something special and they need a certain plugin, and it's a premium plugin, which means you have to buy it. It's not a free plugin for, say, WordPress or whatever. Or maybe they're setting something up. Maybe it's not WordPress, but they're setting up something and they need to purchase something for their website. Well, there's usually two ways you can go about doing this. You can either tell the client, listen, you need to buy this plugin. Here's how much it is. You guys buy it and then I'll install it on the website and that. Or you can tell the client, listen, you pay, I'll buy the plugin, I'll install it, everything, and this is how much it's going to cost you. And depending on what it is, there are certain cases where I've gone back to a client, like say there's a plugin. There's one I use, Gravity Forms. It's my number one choice for a plugin to create forms on any WordPress website. Well, the first time I discovered that plugin, it was a client needed a very specific form and they needed to do certain things that just a normal form wouldn't do. And I discovered from some research that Gravity Forms is the way to go. Now, they offered a couple of tiered pricing. I don't know what it is anymore. I forget what it was, but they had pricing if you were an individual website or if you were a corporate website. And then they also had a developer pricing. And what I looked at the price and it wasn't that different. So I went up to my client and I told them, I said, listen, there's a one-time fee of this price if you want these forms in this format on your website. And my client agreed and they purchased they paid me in order to pay to purchase that plugin. And I purchased the developer license for that plugin. Now, this was a big job I was doing for the client, and the cost of the plugin was like a small fraction of the overall project cost. But it was something I went back to them and I said, listen, this wasn't in the initial quote. If you do want this functionality, I found something that can do it, and this is what it'll cost. And the client paid, and they covered the cost of my developer license for that plugin, which means that now I can use that plugin for any other client that I want, not just for them, because I have a developer's license for it. Now, the same can go for software. I remember years ago, there was a client that needed something, and it was a background pattern. They had found an old psychedelic 1960s style poster, and they wanted to reproduce the type of pattern in the background. And it was really, really weird. And it would have taken me hours in Illustrator to try to recreate it. But I found a little piece of software that can actually make that exact or very similar pattern, and you can adjust it and play with it and do what you want with it. And I told the client, I said, listen, you want that pattern? You're either going to spend X amount of dollars on me doing it manually, or it'll cost this much for me to get this software, and then I can do it. And so they would save money. They actually saved money by me buying this software. And in the process, I got this new software that then over the years, I've used it, not very often, but I have used it for other clients, other jobs as well. So it was something that I wouldn't have gone out or probably wouldn't have purchased on my own. But because I purchased it for a client, it's now available for other clients. The same thing for fonts. When you buy a font as a designer, you have the license to that font and you can use it on your client's jobs. Now, you cannot give the font to the client, but if you design a brochure for a client, you're allowed to use that font on that brochure. And if you design something for another client, you're allowed to use the font on that, as long as you do not give them the font afterwards. And when I say that, I mean the actual physical, like the file that's on your computer for the font. As long as you retain it, you can use it. Well, there have been times when a client wanted a specific font for something, and I had to go out and purchase that font. And I billed the client for that purchase because they specifically wanted that font. But once I have the font and I have the license, I'm allowed to use that font on any commercial job that I'm doing for any client, as long as I don't hand over the actual font file to them. So what I'm getting at is I could have easily said, well, I need to do this job for this client and I found this software. It's going to take me 2-3 hours to do this background image, psychedelic background image, or I can purchase this software at a fraction of the price that it would cost me in my time that will allow me to do it. And I could have just said, well, I'm still going to make money. Maybe I can still charge my client for 3 hours work. or I can give my client a discount because I got this software and just buy it myself. I could have done that, but I approached the client and I said, listen, here's an option. Do you want me to purchase this software? And in that case, the client agreed. Same thing with plugins. And I've done that with numerous plugins over the years where a client needed something specific and I purchased the plugin. They paid for it. But in using it, as long as the license allows you to use it on multiple websites, and some plugins don't. Some of them you would have to buy the plugin for every website, but some plugins say that you're allowed to install it on up to 5 websites or something like that. And in which case, once it's installed on that one client's website, then you're free to use it on 4 or whatever the license agreement allows. And that one client paid for the plugin. Now, if you want to make some extra money and the next client that comes along that needs that same plugin, you can tell them, well, there's a plugin that does this and this is how much it's going to cost you, even though you already own the plugin and you can use it on their website. You could always charge them again for it. But the way I do it is it's just another service that I offer the client. It's like, you need that functionality? I can do that at no extra charge because I have that plugin already. So anyways, that's this week's tip of the week. Getting clients to pay for the things you need to help your other clients. And now, pricing design jobs with undefined timelines. Now, back in episode 11 of the podcast, I talked about pricing strategies for your graphic design business. And in it, I talked about the 3 main strategies that designers use. We bill by the hour, we bill by the project, and we bill by the value. Now, most designers starting off will bill by the hour. Once you get comfortable and you get your feet wet and you get a little bit more confident in your design ability and your business's ability, you'll start pricing by the project. And then once you get really good and you really know your stuff, the holy grail of pricing is pricing by value of the job. And if you want to know more about that, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 11 and listen to that episode. It's one of my most popular episodes and most downloaded episodes to date. But today I'm going to concentrate on the lesser one, the one that's most common when it comes to designers, to freelancers, and especially those that are just starting out. And that's quoting hourly. Now, once you set up your rate, it's really easy to decide. If you spend 3 hours on a job, you bill them 3 hours time your hourly rate. Now, I'm going to touch on something before I get into the undefined times here. One thing that I want to state is a lot of designers have a little bit of confusion on how to charge for partial. Like if you're going to charge, let's just use a nice round number, and you're going to charge $100 per hour for a job, and you work 30 minutes on the job. Well, do you charge $50 or how does this work? Well, there are countless ways for you to do this, but I'll let you know how I've always done it when I've priced by the hour. I have an hourly rate that I bill by the quarter hour. So every 15 minutes. Now, with that said, I do have a minimum price for a job that is 30 minutes. So it doesn't matter if somebody asks me to make a change on their website and I can do it in 30 seconds, I'm charging them for 30 minutes of work because it interrupts my time, my flow. Sometimes if I'm in the middle of another job, it's hard to get back into that job. So I have a policy that I always charge a minimum of 30 minutes. But after that, it's every 15 minutes. And the way it works is if I work 30 minutes, I'm charging 50% of my rate. Okay, let's again use $100 as the example. If I was working anywhere up to 30 minutes, I would charge $50 to the client. As soon as it went to 31 minutes, then I would be charging them $75 because I've gone over the 30. As soon as I went over 45 minutes, then I charge them for the full hour. So if I work 46 minutes on a job, I'm charging them an hour for that job, right up to an hour. If I work an hour and 1 minute, then I'm charging them $125 as if it was worked on for 1 hour and 15 minutes. So between 1 minute and 15 minutes, it doesn't make a difference. It's the same rate. That's the way I do it. There's other designers that divide it up every 10 minutes or every 5 minutes. Some of them go as far as every single minute. So if you work 16 minutes on a job, you're going to quote differently than if you worked 17 minutes on a job. And I just find that a little bit ridiculous, going that minute detail. I just like doing it by the quarter hour. And as I said, I always have a minimum of 30 minutes for a job. So it's $50 minimum. Now, with that out of the way, I just wanted to talk about that, about hourly building. But when you're quoting on a job, first of all, it takes a lot of practice to look at the scope of a job, discuss stuff with a client, go through all discovery, and figure out exactly what you're going to do on a job. It takes a lot of practice to be able to quote up front how long that job will take. If you have a flyer you're doing for a job, it's a 2-sided, 3-fold flyer, or some people call that a brochure or whatever. And you're looking at how much copy, how many photos, there's going to be some design elements. And you have to be able to figure out, okay, well, it's going to take me maybe, say, 45 minutes per panel, maybe an hour per panel. There's 6 panels to this job if you look at the trifold on both sides. So when you look at all that, say if it was an hour, this job's going to take me 6 hours to do. So then I quote 6 hours time my hourly rate. And again, if we use the example of $100, so I would quote the job $600 to design this flyer. Now, as I said, it takes a lot of practice to be able to do that, because some people do that, but then they'll get stuck on something, and who knows, the front panel, they might be playing with it, and it might take them an hour and a half, 2 hours, or the back panel that's really pretty plain, they might get it done in 20 minutes. So overall, it's pretty hard to do. But as I said, once you get a lot of practice, you get really good at this. I remember when I was working at the print shop, there was a lot of people coming in with booklets and a lot of different jobs, and it was up to us to quote on them beforehand. And we got really, really good. Somebody would bring in a 40-page book with ads and all sorts of stuff, and we would go through page by page and figure out, okay, this page is going to take us 8 minutes to do. This page is going to take us 12 minutes. Oh, this page is more complicated. It's going to take us 20 minutes to do. And we would give them, who knows, this entire project will take 19 and a half hours or 26 and a quarter hours. And we got pretty good at being accurate on that. Sometimes, most of the time, it was within an hour or two. And if you're pricing for a 30-hour job and you're off by 2 hours in either direction, you're doing pretty good. But the problem whenever you're quoting that way is sometimes you don't know if some specs may change along the way. Say if you're pricing a 30-page booklet that has all sorts of ads, and all of a sudden, halfway through the job, they come up and they say, hey, we just sold a whole bunch of more ads. Somebody came in and some new sponsors, so we have more ads to add in, or whatever. We're adding another flat in there, so another 4 pages to if it's a saddle stitch book, we're adding another 4 pages in there. So stuff can change, which throws off your quote. And of course, if they're going to add another flat, you're going to renegotiate and all that. But you get the idea that it's pretty tough to figure out a price. Something like a logo. How do you price a logo if you're billing by the hour? When you look at the logo and you're trying to figure out everything that you're going to do, and if you need to give a quote to the client to begin with, it's pretty hard to say, well, this logo is going to take me 5 hours, or this logo is going to take me 10 hours, or this logo is going to take me 20 hours. You don't know, because it's very subjective. You can design something in 30 minutes, show the client, and they love it. And another client, you'll take 3 or 6 or 10 hours designing something, and the client hates it, and it's back to the drawing board. So how do you quote that way when you're not sure? Now, the trick that I use and what I want to share with you today is when you're quoting on these jobs and you don't know how long they will take. Like say if you're designing logos and you're not designing by the project, you're billing by the hour, which a logo or something really should be done by the project. You should give a quote up front, whatever. If you want to do $500 for a logo, $1,000 for a logo, depends, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, it depends who the client is. But say some other jobs that you need to quote and you have no idea how long it's going to take. Or a job might change. There's a potential for the job to change along the way. It is okay to quote a job to your client and say, in your contract, no fixed price. You just say, I will keep track of my time and I will bill you my hourly rate of X dollars per hour. And you know what? A lot of people say, well, you can't do that. But I've been doing that for years. And very rarely has a client ever complained not knowing the price up front. Actually, one of the arguments I give the client is, I can give you a price right now, but because I don't know the full scope of the job, or I don't know how long it's going to take, I'm going to exaggerate that price. I might give you a price of $2,000, which is 20 hours at $100 per hour. And that's what I'm going to quote you. And if you go ahead with the job and I get the job done in 10 hours, you're paying me for 20 hours worth of work. But I'm also taking the risk in that case that what happens if the job goes 30 hours as opposed to 20? Then I'm actually losing money. So in some cases, when I explain to a client that, listen, there's a possibility that it goes less, then I tell them, you have the option that you can pay me my hourly rate. I will keep track of the exact amount of time I spend, and that's all you pay just for the amount that I spend on the job. Now, again, I haven't done this in a long time because I'm more on project and value-based pricing myself these days. But every once in a while, I'll do a job for an old client that's still by the hour, and rarely will I ever quote them a price up front. I just tell them, like, they'll ask me, Mark, what's your hourly rate these days? And I'll say, this is how much I charge by the hour. Okay, go ahead and do the job. And they trust me because they know I'm efficient, that I'm going to get the job done, and I'm not going to diddle daddle, and I'm not going to rack up their price just by wasting time. They're going to get an affordable job that's done well. Now, sometimes you'll come across clients that'll say, well, really, I don't know. It sounds good, but what happens if you end up spending 20 hours on the job? I don't have a budget for that. So there has been times where what I've told the client is that I will give them my hourly rate and I will charge them what I spend up until a maximum price of X amount of dollars. So I've done that before with clients. Say, I'm going to charge you, again, let's keep the $100 an hour example. I'll charge you $100 an hour for this work for the exact amount of time I spend on the job, up to a maximum of $1,600. So I promise you that this job will not exceed $1,600. And if by chance it does, that's the most I will charge you. And sometimes the client will go, oh, well, at least I know what the maximum is. Now, I don't tell them I'm going to charge them $16. I'm going to say that's the maximum I'll charge you. I will actually charge you. So if it takes me 12 hours, I'll charge you $1,200. If it takes me 8 hours, I'll charge you $800. But I will not exceed whatever I said, $1,600 for this job. And sometimes that is enough to appease the client. And you write that right in your contract. Say that you are charging X amount of dollars per hour for this job, up to a maximum of whatever amount that you agree on as the maximum, and that you will not exceed. Now, if you do charge taxes and all that, make sure that you stipulate in your contract that that is your subtotal, your base price. Any applicable taxes will be applied to that maximum. So you might say you have a $1,600 maximum, but if there's taxes, they're going to pay on top of that $1,600. Now, this is a great method for certain projects, as I said, when you don't know how long it's going to take, or it's really hard to guess how long it's going to take. But there's some projects that are really, really out there, like that maybe there is no, how do I word this? There's no fixed scope to the job. Let me give you an example. Every year there's a huge Highland festival in my area, and I do all the advertising for this festival. It's a once a year thing. Now, every year they ask me to design a magazine ad that'll have the date of the festival, some special events, who the guest musicians are at the festival, what sort of special things are happening, a schedule of some of the events, as well as some photos and that to go along. So I design a magazine ad for them, and I charge them a fixed price for that magazine ad. Now, the issue is they want that magazine ad. They're going to publish it in anywhere from 20 to 50 different publications. It's going to go into magazines. It's going to go into newspapers. It's going to go into all sorts of different publications all across Eastern Canada, some of Northern United States, all sorts of different areas in order to attract people to this festival. But the thing is every year they don't know what magazines, what everything, and not everybody takes the same size ad. So once I design the initial ad, then what's going to happen is they're going to come in and they're going to say, okay, Mark, we just bought an ad spot in such and such magazine. Here's the ad spot we bought. And sometimes it'll say we bought a full page ad in this place because the price was good. In this other one, we bought a quarter page horizontal ad. This one, we bought a quarter page vertical ad, or we bought a half page ad, or we bought an eighth page ad. And some other ones, it might just be a business card size. And it's up to me to take the ad and resize it for every single publication. Sometimes they'll say, Mark, we're going to publish in a such and such a newspaper, but they only publish in black and white. So we need the ad converted to black and white. So this is a project that I take on every year, but I have no idea at the beginning of the setting this up. I have no idea how many ads I'm going to do. I have no idea what sizes those ads are going to be. And I have no idea the scope of what's involved, because taking a full page newspaper ad with all the information, you can't just shrink that down to a business card size. So there's some stuff like that's going to have to be dropped out of the ad when it drops to a business card size. I'm not going to have the full event schedule, obviously. I might just have room to put one photo and the main headline event or something like that. So there's a lot of playing around with it. But again, this is a project every year when I take it on, I have no idea how long or how many of these ads I'm going to have to do. So the way I do this is I bill them a minimum price per ad, because again, my minimum price is half an hour. So I bill them for my minimum price per ad plus. So if it takes me more than half an hour to fix the ad, then I charge them accordingly for it. Now, I already charged them a fixed price for the initial ad. So I made enough money off the initial ad that now beyond that, I'm just charging them hourly for the additional ones. But again, I can take an ad and they'll say, Mark, we put this ad in this publication. Well, now we need to put it in this publication. And the size is, the ad's the exact same height, but in this publication, for some reason, the ad is 1/8 of an inch or a couple of millimeters narrower in width, which in all intents and purposes, I can change that ad in probably 30 seconds, maybe a minute, that it takes me to adjust an ad by a couple of millimeters and then resave a new PDF. Well, through the whole process, say it takes me 2 minutes to do that. Well, I'm charging them for 30 minutes worth of work. And then the next ad might be something completely different. So, Mark, we've got a really great price in this newspaper. We're doing a special ad. It's only 1.5 inches wide, but it's the entire height of the newspaper. So, I don't know, 15, 16 inches, which is a really, really oddball size. So I have to really play with it. And that might take me an hour and a half just to get all the information in properly into that ad. So again, I charge them by the time. So my time and everything kind of evens out because, as I said, there's a lot of ads that I'm going to have done within just a couple of minutes, but I'm charging them for 30 minutes worth of work. Now, another option that you could do, and I have done this in the past with other projects, is just start the clock and you work on one piece at a time and you let the clock go. And at the end, you charge them for the time you spent on the job. So if I use these ads as an example, I could design the initial ad, and then every time they have another ad, I would just keep track of the time. This ad took me 5 minutes to do, and the next ad took me 2 minutes to do. Well, that's 7 minutes. The next ad took me 13 minutes. So now we're looking at 20 minutes spent. And at the end of all these ads, I add up all the time that I spent on each individual ad, and I charge them by the hour for the actual time I spent. Now, that is one way to do it, but I don't like doing that because, especially in a project like this one I'm describing, they don't send me every single ad all at once and for me to work on one after the other. They'll send me an ad 1 week and say, here, Mark, here's an ad we need. The deadline for this ad is Friday. And I'll just resize the ad, send it off to the publication. Great. And then the next week they'll say, here, we've got 2 more ads. Here's the 2 different sizes. This one goes to this publication. That one's for that publication, and so forth. So every time I get an ad, I just start a new project saying, okay, now I'm working on the ad for this such and such a publication. And I start off with 30 minutes already on the clock and we get going from there. Or not going from there. I said that wrong. I start off with billing them for 30 minutes, but I start the clock at 0. So after 30, I've spent actual 30 minutes, then it goes beyond 30 minutes. But anything up to 30 minutes, I'm billing them for those 30 minutes. So that's one way of doing it. And the client is happy because at the end, I just charge them. I say, okay, at the end, we did 30, 40, 50 ads. Here's my bill for all the ads. And I have it itemized. Here's what you're paying for this ad, for this ad, for this ad. And most of the ads will cost them the price for 30 minutes worth of work. Now, I don't necessarily tell them how long I spent on each one, It doesn't say that I did that ad in 2 minutes and this ad took me 17 minutes and you're paying the exact same price. I just say, here's the price. And then some ads will be more expensive than 30 minutes worth of work. Now that's an easy one because it's basically the same project, just resizing it over and over and over again. And every once in a while changing colors and doing a black and white as opposed to a colored one. But sometimes you'll have a project like there was another festival that they don't have around anymore, but we had the biggest biggest Canadian. I don't know if it was North American. Anyways, Balloon Festival was in this area. And for years I did the artwork for them. Now that festival is no longer around, but every year I would do their tickets. I would do their brochure. I would design their posters. I would design the t-shirts. So there were so many different projects. And again, it was too hard up front to quote saying, okay, this is how much the tickets are going to cost you. This is how much the flyer is going to cost you. This is how much the posters. This is how much the t-shirt. This is how much the display booth, the whatever, all the different elements. It was just too hard because they didn't know. And there was always stuff coming up. It's, Mark, so-and-so's come on board and we need a sign to go on theirs and we need a special size. So there's so many other projects coming along the way that it was too hard to give them a price up front. So again, that was another one that I did the same way as I did with the ads, where every project had a minimum price and then I was billing them by the hour for what I would spend. And the client was okay knowing what the hourly rate was without knowing what the final price of the job is. So regardless on whether it's the same job over and over, or you're doing a whole bunch of multiple jobs for a single client, ask them. I know some clients want to know what the price is up front. They need to know. And if that's the case, if they come in, they say, no, we need a fixed price, then make sure you figure out, take a wild guess on how long you think it's going to take you to do the job, and then make sure to pad that. If you think the job's going to take you 20 hours to do, then bill the client for 30 hours because you never know what's going to happen. And in all honesty, that's probably the better way to do it, because if you say the job's going to take you 20 hours and you bill the client for 30 hours, but then the job only takes you 16 hours to do, you're making all that extra cash that on time you didn't really spend. So that's a real big bonus. And if you can get away with that, great. And some clients are going to insist on that. Government, for example. I've done jobs for the Ontario government and the Canadian government, and they are people that insist on getting a complete price, because you have to, not only do they sign your contract, but you have to sign one of their contracts as well. And those were ones that I said, listen, I have no idea. You haven't given me the full scope of the work yet. I don't know everything I have to do for this project. How do you want me to quote on it? And they says, we don't care. Just give us a price. So I would just pick some price out of the hat and say, okay, well, I have no idea, $20,000. And they would send me a contract saying, okay, you agree to do this job for $20,000. And I would go like, okay, I never thought you'd agree to that, but sure, no problem. And next thing you know, I do the job and it takes me 2 hours to complete the job. And the government just paid me $20,000. Now, I'm exaggerating. I didn't actually do that for $20,000, but I have done this before where the government has paid me thousands and thousands of dollars more because they insisted on getting a price up front without telling me the full scope. Now, sometimes they'll give you the scope of the job and you're looking at it and you're saying, this doesn't make sense. They're asking for all this stuff that sounds like so much, but really it's not a lot of work. But you're scratching your head when you're looking at these proposals that they send out, and you're saying they've got so many words on this proposal. Am I missing something? This sounds a lot more complicated than it should be. And most often than not, it's really not that complicated. And as I said, there's been plenty of times where I love working for the government. I love doing stuff for the government of Ontario, the government of Canada, because you give them the quote and they hold you to that quote, and it doesn't matter. Now, yes, I suppose if I went over that and I said, it actually cost more than what I quoted, they're going to say, tough, that's what you quoted. But in every instance that I've had a job for them, I made sure to, in some cases, I would figure out, okay, this job's going to take me X amount of hours. Then I would triple it and then quote them on triple that price. And either I was dead on with my time, or sometimes I actually finished the job under my time, and yet I got paid for triple the amount I had quoted. Now, I wish every client could be like that, but that's not the case. That's specific circumstances, and there's some businesses, and as I said, governments are usually like that. But most run-of-the-mill clients you're going to get are not like that. And that's what I'm saying. When sometimes they insist on getting a price, make sure you pad your price so that you get at least what you're working on and you don't end up losing money on the job. Because if you quote them something and it takes you longer, you have to abide by your quote and you're losing money on the job. So you either increase the price, but as I said, a lot of times a client will go along with you just saying, listen, I will bill you X amount of dollars per hour for the exact amount of time I spend on the job. And that's it. And you can appease them by saying they're going to save money this way. And in the long run, most clients usually do save money that way. So that's the way I usually price design jobs that don't have a defined timeline to them. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this topic, there are many different pricing strategies, and this is not necessarily the one I recommend. But when a lot of designers, possibly you included, are starting out, billing by the hour is really the only way that you can. And until you're well established and you can start doing project-based pricing and moving on to value-based pricing. But until you reach that level where you're comfortable, you will be billing by the hour, and you will come across jobs that just you'll just scratch your head out and say, I have no idea how long this will take. And in those situations, the best thing is to be honest with your client and say, I have no idea how long this job will take. Here's what we can do. I will bill you by the hour for the exact amount of time it takes me on this job. And if they are hesitant, then you can say up into a maximum price of, and make sure that you put that maximum price way beyond where you think the job will actually go. Maybe even double what you think. If the job will take 10 hours in your mind, then give them a maximum price of 20 hours worth of work and say, your bill will not go over that price. And most times your client will be okay with that. So there you have it. Now, I would love to know what your approach is to pricing jobs when you don't know exactly how long it'll take. Maybe you have the full specs of the job, but those specs are so undefined, is for lack of a better word, that the time frame for the job could be just about anything. How do you price those jobs? I would love to know. So visit resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 73 and leave me a comment in the show notes for this episode. Now, as always, I have a question of the week. And this question comes in from Tom. And Tom actually submitted 2 questions, but I'm only going to answer one of them this week. I'll save another one for another week. And this week, Tom asks, how many works, projects, or clients do you normally allow yourself to take on simultaneously within a week? Well, thank you, Tom, for that question. You know, it's something I haven't really thought about. I don't have a fixed number, but if I pull out, like, let's just say this week, we're the 3rd week of May here in 2017. And if I pull out my trusty old Bilbo Baggins leather-bound booklet here that I use to keep track of all my jobs, right now on the go, I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I have 19 jobs on the go right now. Now, when I say on the go, these are in various stages that I've got them approved, ready to go. Some of these jobs I haven't actually started yet. Some of these jobs I'm currently working on. Some of them are out to proof. And there's some of them, like I see here, one of these jobs is a t-shirt. That t-shirt's already gone out to the printer. The reason it's still on my list here is I haven't received them back, and I only scratch them off once the client has them. Once the client has the t-shirt, then I will scratch it off my list. But until then, it stays on my list. So right now I have 19 jobs on the go. And there's some of them are big jobs. Some of them are small jobs. I have a couple of podcast artworks. I have another t-shirt, but that t-shirt's really simple because all they do is they change the year. It's the same artwork they use every year on the t-shirt. They just change. I'll have to change 2016, 2017. So that one's only a couple of minutes. And then I do have a few other bigger jobs that I have a booklet to work on and a poster that it might take me a few hours. But that's just right now. So I have 19 jobs on the go, but I don't limit myself except for when it comes to websites. And that's something I used to be very, I just closed my book. I got a little tassel that holds my page and I forgot to put the tassel back before closing the book. Okay, there, I found my page. Sorry about that. What I was saying is when it comes to websites, this goes back to when I used to hand code my websites. I had a policy that I never worked on more than 2 websites at a time because I just found it got really confusing when you're starting working with code, especially when you're spending hours and hours coding and going back and forth. And all of a sudden you switch to another website, and I just didn't want to get confused or anything. Not that I ever did feel confused. I just didn't want to take on more than 2 at a time. Now, since I'm not hand coding very many websites these days, most of it is done through WordPress for my clients. I could take on more, but I've pretty well held to that formula. I do now maybe work on 3 at a time in various stages, but I usually won't take on another. Like I've got a client right now that I signed them up several weeks ago, and I had a conference call with them earlier today, and I told them that I'm finishing a website. It has to launch by Thursday. And as soon as that website launches, then I'm free to start working on their website. So by Friday, I'll be able to start working on theirs. And it's not that I couldn't easily start working on theirs now. It's just a policy I've always held to, that when it comes to websites, I never work on more than 3 now. It used to be 2 when I was hand coding. Now I never work on more than 3. And most of the time I just tell the clients it'll be a few weeks before I can start your website. I'm working on 3 of them right now. And there's one more ahead of you or whatever, or you're next in line. And as soon as one of those 3 is done, then I'll be able to start working on yours. And so that's the way I do that. As far as projects and working within the week, really, that's hard to say. It depends on the scope of the project. If I'm working on a really big project, I could work on it for the entire week sometimes, and that's the only project I work on. And then there's other weeks where I might work on 20 or 30 different projects if they're all small. I mean, as I said, like this t-shirt that it'll take me a couple of minutes to change the artwork from 2016 to 2017. I could whip that off and get it sent off within 10 minutes. Well, that's one project to scratch off of my book and move on to the next project. And if they're all projects like that, I can take on a whole lot. Now, different times throughout the year, this will go up and down. Like I said, right now I have 19 projects on the go. There's other times where I could have even more than that. And then there's other times of the year where I've been down to only 2 or 3 projects on the go. And that's just the nature of running a graphic design business. There's times when things get slow. And those are the times when I try to focus on my own stuff and work on my own marketing. And in my case, I try to work stuff with the podcast more. Whenever it gets slow is when I try to come up with ideas and do a lot of back work with the podcast and with other things. But it's an up and down world that we live in. There's no guaranteed income, which is one thing that a lot of people find scary. And that's why they don't want to dive into the world of freelance or running your own design business, because of that uncertainty of income, where if you're working somewhere, you're guaranteed that every Friday or every second week or every bi-weekly or whatever, every month at some regular time frame, you are getting a fixed salary. You know exactly how much you are being paid every paycheck. And some people absolutely need that. It's their comfort. They need that certainty in order to get them through life. Where other people like myself, if things get slow, I'm not making that income that week. So I have to balance it out. And weeks like now that I have 19 jobs on the go, these are the times where the extra money I make here will be put aside for those weeks when things get slow. So anyways, I don't know if that's what you were asking for, Tom, in this question, but it can really vary. And every designer, depends on the type of projects you work on, it will vary. But yeah, and as far as clients, I don't know, like some of these, when I mentioned these were actual projects that I'm working on, and some of them, like 2 or 3 of them might be for the same client. So I didn't actually count how many individual clients I'm doing work for right now. It's just how many projects I have on the go right now. So anyways, that's my answer to this week's question. Thanks for sending it in, Tom. I'll save your other half of your question for another week, but I would love to get more questions in for the podcast. Please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback to submit your question, and I will try to answer it on a future episode of the podcast. So that's it for now. Oh, one more thing before I go. I just want to clarify something. I had a few people contact me about Facebook. I mentioned the great community we have in the Facebook group. Well, that is the Facebook group. I do have a Resourceful Designer Facebook page, which you can get to by going to facebook.com/resourcefuldesigner. That's the page, which just is information about graphic design and notification when a new podcast episode comes out and some other stuff. But the actual group is where all the interaction is taking place. And you can get to that by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/group. So they are two different things, because I had a few people contact me and say, I joined the Facebook thing that you mentioned on the podcast, but you talk about how active it is, and I really don't see very much action taking place here. Well, that's because they were on the Facebook page. But if you join the Facebook group, there is a great community there. So that's it for me this week. Look forward to talking to you again next week about our graphic design business. Until then, I am Mark DeCote, and I wish you all the best in your graphic design business. And as always, I remind you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.